Hello everyone, hope you are doing well. Wish you all a very happy new year. I sincerely hope that by now you have completed watching all the previous videos on rhetoric or figures of speech and you have mastered the art of identifying figures of speech. This is part 9 of figures of speech or rhetoric series. In this video, I shall discuss previous year's questions on rhetoric and I shall use the question papers of Calcutta University, Semester 5 under the CBCS System, Semester 5 English Honours. So let's start with the question paper of CU 2020. So you will be given two stanzas, two questions, out of which you have to answer one. This one was the first question. Can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath? Can honor's voice provoke the silent dust, or flattery soothe the dull cold ear of death? So here in this stanza we can see two cases of interrogations. There are two interrogations. Can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath? This is the first one. And the second one is, can honor's voice provoke the silent dust, or flattery soothe the dull cold ear of death? In both these questions, the answers to the questions are implied in the very questions, which is the primary trait of an interrogation. Here we have found several cases of personifications, storied urn and animated bust. Both are inanimate objects and they have been personified in the word call. Next is honor. Honor is an abstract idea which is personified in the words voice and provoke. Flattery, which is also an abstract idea, has been personified in the word soothe. Death, which is an abstract idea, has been personified in the word ear, cold ear of death. Okay? Yes. So next figure of speech that we find in this stanza is periphrasis. So the word mansion, mansion actually refers to the body. So body is mentioned in a roundabout way through the word mansion. Then life. Life is mentioned in a roundabout way through the phrase fleeting breath. So two cases of periphrasis. Next we can see synecdoche. Dust here actually refers to grave. So dust is the whole and grave is a part of it. So this is a synecdoche, the whole for the part. The last figure of speech that we can see here is dull cold ear of death. So here the epithets dull and cold have been transferred from death to ear. Okay? So this is a case of transferred epithet. We are now moving on to the next question. Exult, O shores, and ring, O bells, but I with mournful tread walk the deck, my captain lies fallen cold and dead. Here we have two cases of apostrophe in the first line. Exult, O shores, and ring, O bells. Here, impassioned address has been made to shores and bells. So this is cases of apostrophe. Here we also find personifications. The inanimate objects, shores and bells, have been personified through the words exult and ring, respectively. In this sentence, we find another figure of speech, that is pallilogia. Here in this line, the word "o" has been repeated twice. Hence, this is pallilogia. Next figure of speech is "but I with mournful tread." So, mournful tread is an example of transferred epithet. Here, the epithet mournful has been transferred from the speaker to the word tread. In the same line, we find another figure of speech, that is personification. Tread is here personified through the word mournful. Next figure of speech is "my captain lies fallen cold." So, this is an example of vision, where a vivid picture or image of the captain has been presented through the line. So, I hope it is clear. Now we are moving on to the question paper of 2021. The first question was, "Milton, thou shouldst be leaving at this hour. England hath need of thee. She is a fen of stagnant waters, altar, sword, and pen, fireside, the heroic wealth of hall and bower." So, the figures of speech contained in this stanza are given below. Number one, there is a case of the apostrophe in the very first line. Here, an impassioned address is made to Milton, a dead person. This is short, the address is short and impulsive. Milton is imagined as living and listening to the poet. So, this is an example of apostrophe. Next, we have synecdoche. So, there is a synecdoche in the word hour. This is substituted for age. It is a case of the part for the whole. Next, the statement "England hath need of thee" is a personification. England, an abstract idea, is invested with the attribute of living being in the phrase "hath need." This is also a metonymy. England is substituted for English people or people living in England. This is a case of the container for the thing contained. There is a metaphor in "she is a fen of stagnant waters." An implied comparison is made between two unallied objects, she, that is England, and fen. There is also a hyperbole in this expression. It is too much to compare England to a fen of stagnant waters. Next, there are several cases of metonymy in the expression altar, sword, and pen, fireside, the heroic wealth of hall and bower. The substitution is made in the following ways. Altar has been substituted for church, symbol for the thing symbolized. Sword and pen for the fighter and the writer, respectively. Instruments for the agents. Fireside, hall, and bower for domesticity. So, these are the figures of speech that we find in this stanza. Next, this is the second question of 2021. What time would spare from steel receives its date and Monuments like men submit to fate. Still could the labor of the gods destroy and strike to dust the imperial towers of Troy. The figures of speech contained in the passage above are stated and explained below. Okay, you will write in this way and then you will start giving one after another figures of speech. So in the first line, what time would spare, time has been, there is a case of personification. Here, time has been personified in the word would spare. This is the first and second lines are also an example of exclamation, as this is an uh, this is an emotional expression and it has an interjection in the sentence what, okay? And at the end of the sentence we can see the exclamation mark. Hence this is an example of exclamation. In the second line, and monuments like men submit to fate. Here we have several figures of speech. In the second line, we have personification, monuments, the word monuments, which is an inanimate object. It has been personified in the verb submit to fate. Second figure of speech in the sentence is simile. Here, monuments have been compared with men and the point of comparison is mentioned through the word like. Third figure of speech in the line is alliteration. The letter aim is repeated at the beginning of two words in the same line. Next line, still could the labor of the gods destroy. So here we have one personification. So still an inanimate object is given the attribute of a living being in the verbs destroy and strike. Okay, and the lines also contain a synecdoche in steel. Steel is substituted for weapons made of steel. So this is a case of the material for the thing made. The lines also contain hyperboles for the statements are exaggerated. There is an allusion in strike to dust the imperial towers of Troy. The expression brings to one's mind the past incident of the Trojan War and the fall of Troy to the Greeks. Towers of Troy is also a case of synecdoche. Here, the city of Troy is substituted by towers. This is a case of the part for the whole. This is also a hyperbaton. Still could the labor of the gods destroy. So the correct grammatical order should have been still could destroy the labor of the gods. So the correct grammatical order has been inversed in the sentence and hence this is a case of hyperbaton. These are the figures of speech that we can see in this passage. Next, I am moving on to the question paper of 2022. This cascade India's glowing gems unlocks and all Arabia breathes from yonder box. The tortoise here and elephant unite, transformed to combs, the speckled and the white. Here files of pins extend their shining rows, pups, powder patches, Bibles, billet doux. The following figures of speech can be found in the passage. The first line, this cascade India's glowing gems unlocks. This is a case of hyperbaton, as the correct grammatical order has been inversed here. Second line, and all Arabia breathes from yonder box. Here we have one case of alliteration, as the letter A has been repeated at the beginning of successive words in the same line. Here we also have a case of metonymy, as Arabia actually refers to perfumes, right? Arabia breathes from yonder box. So, place for its production. Arabia is famous for its perfumes. So, instead of mentioning perfume in the sentence, the poet has mentioned Arabia. So, this is a case of metonymy, place for its production. The tortoise here and elephant unite. So there are synecdoches in the sentence. Tortoise and elephant are substituted for the tortoise shell and the elephant's task, respectively. These are the cases of the whole for the part. Second, there is a reason in transformed to combs, the speckled and the white. The combs are described as if present. An imaginary account is given here, a lifelike representation. Next, there is a personification in here files of pins extend their shining rows. Here pins or files of pins, inanimate objects, are given the attribute of a living being in the words extend there. Next, there is a transferred epithet in the line. The epithet shining belongs properly to pins, but this is transferred to rows. So, this is a case of transferred epithet. Next, there are alliterations in the last line. Puffs, powdered patches. In these three words, the letter P has been repeated, and Bibles and Biledu. In these words, the letter B has been repeated at the beginning of successive words in the same sentence. There is an accendaton for the connecting conjunction and is dropped after Bibles. There is an anticlimax in Bibles Biledu. So, a sudden fall from the lofty element Bibles to the low Biledu is noted here. The purpose is to evoke ridicule for the person concerned. Next question. The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth ever gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory lead but to the grave. There are several figures of speech in the passage. In the first line, the boast of heraldry, the pomp of power. In the second, all that beauty, all that wealth. So, all these are abstract ideas, but they are invested with the attributes of a living being in the words give and awaits. There is a case of periphrases in the phrase the inevitable hour. Death is referred to here in a roundabout way in the expression the inevitable hour. There is a case of epigram in the paths of glory lead but to the grave. In the present case, there is a contradiction in the apparent meaning of the sentence, for how can the paths of glory lead but to the grave? This shocks but rouses an inner significance that all the acts of glory end in death. Next, there is another case of personification. in the paths of glory lead but to the grave. So the paths of glory, an abstract idea is invested with with the attributes of a living being in the verb lead. There is a case of metonymy too in lead but to the grave. Here, grave is substituted for death. There is a loose connection between grave and death. Death is the cause that leads one to the grave, which is the effect. So, this is a case of the effect for the cause. There are also the cases of alliteration. In the first case, the letter P is repeated at the beginning of nearly successive words, pomp and power. In the second case, the letter A is repeated at the beginning of successive words, and all. And again, awaits and alike. So, we are moving on to the next year's question paper, which is 2023. So, the last year's question paper, where Palsy shakes a few sad last grey hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow and leaden-eyed despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. So the following figures of speech can be found in the passage. There is a synecdoche in Palsy shakes a few sad last grey hairs. Palsy is used to substitute the paralytic person. This is a case of the abstract for the concrete. Next, there is a case of personification. For Palsy, an abstract idea gets the attribute of a living being in the verb shakes. Next, there is an ascendaton in a few sad last grey hairs. The connecting conjunction and is here dropped to secure force and vividness. Next, this is also a climax for a series of words, few, sad, and last. These are arranged in an ascending order of importance. There is also a synecdoche in where youth grows. Youth is here used to substitute young people. This is the case of the abstract for the concrete. Next, the expression where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies is a polysyndeton. The connecting conjunction and is excessively used for an increased emphasis. Next, this is also a case of the climax. The ideas grow pale, grows spectre thin, and dies are arranged in an ascending order of importance. Next, there is also a metaphor. Youth and spectre, two unallied things, are compared in the point of thinness. The point of comparison is implied. Next, there is a hyperbole in the expression where but to think is to be full of sorrow. The statement is indeed exaggerated. Next, there is a metaphor in leaden-eyed. Lead and eye, two unallied objects are compared. The point of comparison is implied. Next, there is a personification in leaden-eyed despairs. Despair, an abstract idea, gets the attributes of a living being in the word leaden-eyed. Next, The whole passage contains an epanaphora. Right? This figure consists in the reiteration of the same word or words at the beginning of successive lines or sentences or clauses. Here, the word where is repeated or reiterated at the beginning of successive lines, the first three lines. Okay, come to the fifth line where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes. This is a case of synecdoche. Here, beauty is substituted for beautiful women. The abstract quality is named for the concrete personality. This is a case of the abstract for the concrete. This is also a case of transferred epithet. Here the epithet lustrous is transferred to eyes, though it originally belongs to beauty. This is also a case of personification. Beauty, an abstract idea, is invested with the attributes of a living being in the verb cannot keep. Okay, and the last line, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. So, in this line, love, an abstract idea, has been personified in the word pine. So, this is a case of personification. The last question, O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes, O thou who chariotest to their dark wintry dead. There are several figures of speech in the passage. Wild west wind is a case of alliteration. Here the letter W is repeated at the beginning of successive words wild, west and wind in the same line. There are several cases of personification. In the first place, autumn, a natural season, is given the attributes of a living being in the expression breath of autumn's being. In the second place, the leaves, a kind of natural object, are invested with the attributes of a living being in dead and are driven. There are several cases of simile. In a simile, there is an explicit comparison between two unallied objects, and the point of comparison is mentioned. So, here in the first place, two unallied objects explicitly compared are west wind and enchanter. In the second place, an explicit comparison is made between two unallied objects, leaves and ghosts. In all these cases, the point of comparison is made explicit by the word like. There is a case of oxymoron in unseen presence. Here, two contradictory words juxtaposed are unseen and presence. In the line, yellow and black and pale and hectic red. In this line, we can find one polysyndeton. Here, the connecting conjunction and is excessively used for the purpose of the vividness of description. In the second, third, fourth, and fifth lines, we can see a case of metaphor. Here, an implicit comparison has been made between leaves and pestilence-stricken multitude, two unallied objects. Next one is dark wintry bed is a case of periphrasis. In a periphrasis, a roundabout statement is made about a thing or an affair. Here, cold underground is expressed in a roundabout way in dark wintry bed. The whole passage is a case of reason. Here an imaginary picture is drawn so as to indicate the whole scene as real. The whole passage is also a case of apostrophe. Here a short, passionate address is made to the west wind, a natural object, and this is imagined as living and listening to the speaker. So with this, I have completed the previous year's questions on rhetoric from the question papers of CBCS. I hope you have understood all the figures of speech, and please stay tuned for the next videos where I shall upload a few important questions for your final examination. Thank you for watching the video. If you have found this video useful, then please like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Keep watching, keep learning. Thank you all.